But yeah, Mystery, hopefully that answers your question. That's what I would do. That's like I said, the easiest solution for that. Okay, hopefully the stream name is changed. It says it is on this side. If not, we'll fix it afterwards. No big deal. All right, let's go ahead and close that down. So yes, so okay, so let's say you have an alpha that you want to bring in to noise. So I'm going to go ahead and actually back this up. So we have this here. So if you go to noise, you have this down at the bottom. It might be hard to see because of my face right there. It says alpha on, alpha off. If you click that and you have an alpha or texture elsewhere that you can utilize, like for this case, we'll have pants texture. Now you can use this alpha for that. So you can adjust the alpha scaling and the strength itself. Again, turn relative on or off to give you just a higher bit of resolution. Or strength, rather. And then, yeah, you could turn that this way. And then if you hit OK, that's how you would do that if you wanted to use some sort of alpha or anything like that. However, if you're in here and you're using an alpha that has color, remember the alphas are black and white. So if there's any color to that alpha, you're limiting the alpha's potential. So you can't bring in a color map and really have it display any real cool effects. You really just want to work with black and white scaling for your alpha. So that's one thing to remember too. But that's how I approached it, Justin. It was really, really simple. I don't do anything too fancy. Like I said, UV and then noise plugin. That's going to take you to a lot of cool stuff. And this menu is really powerful. There is a lot of presets, and then you can adjust those presets. So if you pick grid, for example, you can adjust the angles here. And you can see them working in real time. You can adjust all of this to fit your needs, even offset it. Whatever works for you. I usually leave it as default. You can adjust the scaling, of course, too. Make them larger or smaller. And then once you hit OK, that's then going to bring you back to this. And then you just start, again, you just start making your adjustments as much as you can. Now, if you want to, so here, let's recreate that, because then there's another trick that I do too. So let's go to noise plugin. It's propagated over here. So let's come back over here to grid. Let's go OK. What I'm going to do is, let me just create something really fast. That way we can have a little bit of real time. Let's do this right there. Let's go smaller. Perfect. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. I'm going to subdivide a few times. I'll do this at 5 mil. Anytime you're working with textures, it's good to have enough geometry. Apply the mesh. Now, here's something you could do too. Let's say you want this to pop a little bit because you're not satisfied. What you could do is, now that this is real geometry, you could go into masking and mask by cavity. That up. And then masking by cavity will actually, you know, go in and make sure that those cavities are nice and masked off. Invert that, and then maybe pick like a darker color and fill that color. Let's say color, RGB, fill that color a little bit. And now you have a darker color within that texture so that it pops just a little bit more. And then don't forget too, if you go to surface noise, even if you apply it, go into edit, you can come up to the top and actually save this out and say like, oh, this is my ants texture. Boom. Now you have that forever. Oh, the stream, oh, you're watching crash, I'll find it again. Okay, no worries, no worries. Nice, nice. Hello, how are you doing, Adrian? What's going on? Aaron does art. How you doing, man? Hopefully I said that right. So yes, so hopefully that answers that question. It's really cool to be able to do all that stuff. And you can apply textures multiple times if you want, or you can delete it and say, bah, call it a day, or just turn it off. What's really cool, if you're still working with the keyshot workflow, you don't have to apply the noise texture for it to propagate in keyshot. So if you're working with something that has lower geometry and you want that texture there and you're satisfied, but you don't want to apply it to mesh because it makes your model too dense, just leave that noise on, and then when you use the bridge over the keyshot, it will keep those textures. I watch it and apply it to my Jin character and pop him in the Discord. Sounds good, man. That is a bot. Yep. Cool. All right. Go ahead and move it on through. Cool. All right, let's back this up. I'm just going to go ahead and delete this one. Turn everything else on. Turn this back over here. And let's delete this color palette. Hey, Kairos, how you doing? Welcome in, welcome in. We're just in time to do 3D printing stuff. We're going to be prepping for 3D print. So if you guys have any questions about that, let me know. We already did a basic kind of block out of how many parts we're going to have. We're going to end up with about 7 parts, give or take, if everything goes okay. Nothing too complicated. We're just going to be basically figuring out how to break it up and then going from there. So the first thing I like to do is I keep everything in folders as much as I can. Now, luckily, the head and the hair, I already have them in folders. So it's going to be really easy to merge those together. So let's start with that. So I'm going to go over to V3, which is just basically a new way to help kind of isolate all of the subtools I want to see. Cool. What is this? What is this in here? Oh, that's my naming convention. Never mind. Some random piece. So I already have this, which is nice. So what I'm going to do is we're just going to go ahead and going to merge this folder. Take a look at this. Perfect. Okay, let's see. How was your first time? Well, sorry, I cannot read today. How was your first time experience with ZBrush sculpting? Not gonna lie, to me it was a pain. Actually, I'm not gonna lie either. My first experience with ZBrush sculpting, it was overwhelming, for sure. I've been sculpting for almost 7 years now, and I remember my first time when I looked at ZBrush, it felt like I got into a super high-end race car and I didn't even know how to start the car. Like it felt like that. But luckily, the best thing about ZBrush is once you learn how to just get the sphere started or the primitive shape started, and you just kind of play with brushes, it was a little easier for me to just kind of break ZBrush, see what happened when I did something and it crashed. I learned from that. And then of course the Ask ZBrush videos were super helpful. But yeah, my first couple times, not gonna lie, was pretty rough. But you know, I would say after a few attempts, I started getting the hang of it. And I still use the standard UI, as you could see. So yeah, it can seem intimidating, but it's just a lot of features. And once you learn that there's a bunch of features that you don't really need to worry about right away, just start doing something. It makes it a little bit easier, I think. But yeah, I'm with you. I think a lot of people actually do have a harder start in the beginning, but after a while it goes through. Oh, you like my headphones? Nice. Yeah, these are the Corsair HS80, I think. Yeah, they're really comfortable. I use them all the time. Okay. Let's go ahead and save ZTL process. Now this is merged together. Now I'm going to go ahead and start looking at the body. Pardon me? Okay. Now, all we're really going to do here is just focus on merging stuff together. So I'm not worried about UVs. I'm not worried about anything because I'm going to end up dynameshing a lot of it. So I'm just going to start merging the stuff together that I know goes well together. So first thing, like his gloves, we're just going to start merging that. And we're going simple with our key cuts. We're just going to be basically making tapered square pegs. Nothing too fancy. Thanks, thanks, yeah. What I love is the band. Can't really see it, but there is a band that actually rests on your head, not this big metal not this metal or plastic band itself. So it's an actual elastic band that's really nice. Merge this. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep the hands and the gloves separate out the gate, because there's no real need to merge that to the full body and then just to cut it. So I kind of prepped for that a little bit by chopping off his hands when I was burying the gloves, or burying his arms into the gloves. So we'll find his hands, come up here, and now let's go ahead and merge those together. And just remember, if you do have subdivisions and you're merging subtools together, there's a great chance you'll lose subdivisions, because you can't merge a subtool with subdivision level 5 and with a subtool with subdivision level 3 and have it keep the proper hierarchy. So do keep that in mind when you are merging stuff together, that it is highly possible you'll lose subdivisions. But we're merging and then we're going to be dynameshing, so it's not really going to matter so much. Okay, we have his torso here, which is good. Now his legs, I'm going to kick those out, actually. And we don't need this folder anymore. So we're going to break that stuff up. I'm not going to need his hair either. We're going to delete that folder, and we'll delete his head folder here. But now that I've done that, I'm going to create a second ZTL just in case something happens and I need to go back in time. Hey, what's up, Uzar? Yes, you can ask a question, absolutely. Is there any option to do the set flow option in ZBrush to an edge? Set flow option in ZBrush, like in Blender or Cinema 4D, recently introduced. Set flow. I'm not sure if I know that feature. Is that Hold on one second. You know, there was actually a Ask ZBrush video that maybe it wasn't an Ask ZBrush video, but there was a video about edge constraints with shift key, set flow with a single mesh. Maybe check this out to hopefully answer your question. That might help you out a little bit, but I'm unfamiliar with that feature. So, yeah. But what I can do too is I can also save that question, and we can try to tackle it a little bit further, maybe in another video. But hopefully that helps you out. Sorry, couldn't answer that question. Yeah. Yeah, so this is, do you only use ZBrush? This is a Pixo stream, so we're focusing on ZBrush as much as possible. But yeah, no problem. Okay. All right, let's go back. Now the stand here, what we're going to do is, the stand is pretty simple. It's obviously, there's nothing too fancy about this stand. No, stop. Okay, so I'm just going to subdivide that a few times. That bad boy on. And then we're just going to merge that folder together. And then we're just going to delete the stand folder itself. We don't need to do any of that. Let's kick that at the bottom. I like to have some sort of hierarchy as much as possible. Okay. Next, what we're going to do is actually start bringing together some of the strands and the belts. Yep. So this is just a bit of organizing at this point. Okay. For here, what we're going to do is his legs need to be part of his pants. officially. So I'm going to go ahead and merge that down into both of his legs. Down. And we have gap here. So I'm going to be merging all together the middle section. And then we need to figure out what we're going to cut and what's gonna keep. Go. Merge down into his belt. So then we got his belt section right here. If we solo this out, we now have this section here. And we'll need to clean that up just a little bit to make that work officially. You can see we have some holes in the back that we can clean up. And actually, we might just duplicate some stuff with this torso, chop that off, and fit that in. Let's move that down. So we'll call, so this is now his pants. And then we'll name this, we'll just call this Torngi. There we go. There we go. Did I delete his hair? I think I deleted his hair. All right, let's go back here real quick. This is why you load. This is why you save everything. Looks like I accidentally deleted his hair. So let's load up a previous version real quick. Go ahead and merge this hair. Copy. Come on over. Paste. And then merge down. There we go. Always save, always save, always save. And there we go. I did change the stream title on the stream side, but it's not activating in over, so we'll just change it after the fact. I know it's a bit annoying, but I figure we'll just focus on the stream instead of troubleshooting, and we'll fix it after the fact. That's been happening more and more often. I know we're trying to figure that out. Okay, so here's our pieces. So we have about 7 pieces if we count the hands being 2 separate pieces. So this is a great start to go ahead and figure out. Now we need to figure out how to make these parts solid and then start cutting into them so it can be good. The title's correct on your side? Yeah, we did change it in the beginning, so hopefully it sticks over. But no big deal. Okay. Now we need to start kind of figuring out where we're going to put our keys, and then of course too, we want to figure out all the other good stuff. I'm probably going to want to make this part right here. We got to fix these holes. We got to fix these issues within it. So what we want to do is add geometry that's going to allow us to weld it together, fix those issues, but then still keep this piece solid because we want everything watertight as much as we can. So, and we can see too, if we go in here to transparency mode, we can see just how everything is kind of intersecting. And so the idea here is to clean this up. Let's start by adding in some usable geometry. So I'm just going to solo, just keep this one going. So V3 will just spout this guy. I'm actually going to insert simple cylinder. We're not going to do anything too crazy. Turn perspective off. I don't use perspective when I'm cutting because you can make a wrong cut pretty easily. And we don't have to worry about color either. Let's turn the color off. Now I'm just going to take the move brush here, start intersecting this where I want it to be solid. And once we get this, we'll critique it just a little bit more once we get it in place, and we'll see if it meshes well. Up. Actually put his pants on. We don't want to break out of that too much. Looks like we have a lot of leeway, so go ahead and just turn that smooth down. I think when you fixed it, crashed the old one and started the new one. Crashed on me and the new tube. Oh, gotcha. Well, I have a question. Do you know the way? Do you know the way to color a sculpt character to anime or comic style? I don't want to make it too realistic. So kind of. There are a couple shaders and stuff you can use, but what's really cool in ZBrush is we actually have, if you go up to the spotlight under NPR, we actually have a couple cartoon preset renders that would be very simple for you to just turn on. So let me save this real fast. So if we have everything here, you have to reload that. So just go up to your project and then say like cartoon render. It's going to set up a new project because it's a project preset. So no, we don't want to save anything. Let's just go ahead and bring that in. So now you have this, which is already kind of a toonish, anime-ish vibe for it. You just load in your project. And this will start to give you that kind of vibe. Now for like full anime stuff, there are some presets that one of our live streamers, Sakaki, he actually has SK brushes and he has presets to that. So let me link you to that as well, because he has some really cool stuff. I'll drop a link to his Gumroad where you can get it. Boop. That way you have both the ZBrush default stuff, and then you also have stuff here. But he has SK line shaders right here. So, and his brushes are amazing, and he charges absolutely nothing for it. So, but you click on the latest one, is this guy right here, and it has custom materials, UIs, all that stuff. So I would check that out since he's like one of the top anime guys here next to Daisuke. So that should get you started as well. But yeah. So again, that's Spotlight, NPR, and then one of the shaders. Yeah, not a problem. Glad to help out. All right, let's go ahead. And of course, if for some reason you're like, you want to get out of this, just reload the default project back at the start and I'll take you back to the beginning. Or just turn ZBrush off and on again. There you go. All right. In there. From perspective off. I'm actually going to use the clip curve brush here. Kind of keep that straight a bit. Now for this guy right here in particular, let's go ahead and do polygroups, auto groups, because they're all separate pieces. So polygroups, auto groups. So Control Shift and select this section. Now I'm going to go ahead and kind of mask this off here, because this is I just shoved this into his pants, right? Come here, I'm going to go ahead and Control Shift and then Control Tap on the side to mask that. Control Shift to come back. Invert that, bring this here, and now all that area is masked off. So this way what I can do is I can clip curve and kind of shove that material down. Of course, I'm doing this at 14 mil, which is probably, you know, this could go either way. Hey, what's up, Ram? How you doing? Hey, there we go. There we go. Cool. Now that's out the way. How are you doing? Welcome in, welcome in. We're actually prepping for 3D print right now, so if you have any questions about it, feel free to ask away. Now we're going to go ahead and I'm going to clip curve this down a little bit. So clip curve, it's not actually cutting the geometry if you're not aware of. It's actually kind of smashing it down to the nearest supporting edge loop as much as it can. So just kind of just shoving that, making it a nice flat surface for me, which will be perfect because when we merge this all together, should give me some pretty good results of what I'm looking for. Like I said, we will be dynameshing that. But this way I can basically put, the idea here is to punch a hole through this so that the pants and the torso actually support this together. So the key, we go ahead and delete this, add the key. So if they got the torso up here, right? Here's his torso. And then of course we have his pants. Whee! The key is going to start here in the torso. Going to punch through. And it's going to lock this, basically sandwiching it. That's the idea. So that's where we're going. Hey! Follow, how you doing? In the Rebel. 14 mil brush. I know, right? It's like, what am I sculpting again for a character? So I'm actually breaking apart my Ken Masters sculpt for 3D printing. So if we go ahead and turn this all on, here's the sculpt. I'm actually getting this prepped for 3D printing right now. Let me go ahead and save it since I did a lot of scary stuff in the beginning. Yeah, actually, let me. I like to have him. We'll have him watching me break them. Go to draw, 85 millimeter, Shift S. That was not what I wanted to do. There you go. And Shift S. Perfect. Go to V3. So now it's also important to realize right here that we need to kind of push this back in just a little bit. That's definitely intersecting, but I don't want that sticking out. Pretty different since the last time I saw it. Yeah, thank you, thank you. Yeah, I've put a lot of work in this over the last few weeks. I wasn't able to stream for a little bit of time just due to work being so busy. So now that I'm back on a good schedule, but in between I was able to like kind of do some stuff. So it was nice. Ken Masters from Street Fighter. Although we probably could just straight up convert him into He-Man. That wouldn't be hard at all. Okay, so I'm going to take this pants. Now this is where I love back face mask. So I'm going to go ahead and go to auto masking, back face mask. Areas like this, we just need to pull back and make sure that it's connecting. And again, we're going to be dynameshing it, so it doesn't really matter on the inside of that. We're just going to end up welding it. That will help and keep it in check. There we go. The inside, that's going to be good. Nobody's going to see that because we're going to cut against that. Now, if I turn his pants on, okay, that part, this right here, we need to actually fix. So let's go back to back face mask, turn that off. Now what we can do is start pulling that in a little bit. That tucks in like such. And I want it to tuck in. We're going to cut against, so it doesn't really matter right now where that's at. It could be super low. Just want to kind of hide it. So that way it's not popping out in areas we don't want it to be. That in. When you do something like this, just make sure you take your time, because prepping for 3D print, you know, you want to make sure that it is, that every little spot is kind of accounted for, taken care of, etc., etc. Corinthian Studios, how you doing? Hello, hello. Do I like kimchi? Yeah, kimchi is actually pretty tasty. Are you going to do all the Street Fighter characters? No, actually, I'm not going to do all the Street Fighter characters. But I'm actually, I personally, in my private Discord, I'm actually set up kind of, not a challenge, it's just more of a collaboration of a bunch of artists putting together their own take on a Street Fighter character in their own style. So it's a lot of fun. So I decided to do Ken for that. Let's see. I understand I had to make 4 different models since yesterday to deliver them tomorrow. I'm working like crazy these past couple days. Oh, man. Get it. Yeah. Okay. I'm not going to worry about the teeniest little bits that are sticking out. We'll just weld that together, and then we'll fix the remaining. I want to make sure everything else looks like it's doing its part. Okay, great. Now that we got that in order, what I'm going to do now is merge it down. So that way it's now joined together, and that's one part. So I can see how that's going to fit in. But that fills in a lot of those gaps and issues I was having. And then, of course, ideally, I'll be printing this like this. So that's something to keep in mind, too. If you're printing, it doesn't matter FDM or resin. The idea is that you want to be able to control how exactly things get printed. And if you can, kind of have it support itself. Since all of these are kind of pointed up, when I flip it upside down, including the belt, it's actually part of the reason why I kept it that way. I know I can support this underside pretty simply. Maybe at a slight angle, maybe support under here a little bit. Might be some little in-between bits, but again, nothing too crucial. All of this will kind of help stand and support on its own. So that's important to remember. So yeah, that's actually going to print really well. So I'm not too worried about that. That's how I would prep that one. So the break of the model for printing is the break similar to how you would break it up for toys, keeping in mind that each client might want joint broke. Yes. Okay. So all right. So to clarify, yeah. So we're prepping a static statue. So there's a difference between a static statue and an articulated statue or toy. So when you hear, like, so here, this is static. He's not going to be moving. So the process is still similar. We're picking the best locations in order to break him apart so that he could be put back together correctly and print correctly as well. There is no difference in the approach between articulated and fixed in the mindset of picking the right location that you want to break apart and then applying the joints correctly. Because it's fixed, we're just going to be using like tapered, plugs that are going to fit together and then be glued, or ideally using magnets so you could take it apart, put it back together. With articulation, my approach is kind of the same thing. I'm going to isolate the best parts to break them apart, but now I'm just using different joints. So instead of using pegs, I'm going to be using cylinders and spheres to then put a joint that can move. So it's similar in the mental approach of how you do it, but I'd just be using a different tool. Does that make sense? Hopefully I clarified that well. So for this one, this is a static statue. I'm pretty excited to finish that Leo I've been making. Nice. Did you see it in? I think I did see it. If tag me in it, and I'll take a look afterwards. It sounds familiar. I'm pretty sure I saw it, but I'm drawing a blank, so forgive me. I get your drift. That's funny. That's too much. Okay, so his legs. His legs itself. So we're gonna look at his pants now. Okay, let's not do it again. Yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate it. Don't mind me. I try to comment on everything as best I can. I probably drop the ball sometimes. Is it possible to make VFX in ZBrush, like something glowing on that person's hand? Kind of. Not really. ZBrush is more of a sculpting and painting program, not so much a VFX program. You could get away with some tricks, you know, through like render filters. For example, if you wanted something to glow in a way, I did it once before. Let's take a sphere real quick. If you were to set this to flat color and then give it like some sort of color, when you go to render, for example, let's plot this over here. The Bpr filters, you could be able to do some sort of like glow effect. And then I believe if we... Oh, that's gray range. Go back to that. Back to that being white. Oh, wait, color. Here we go. You can grab that. And I think you can play with the range of this. I remember doing this once, but it's kind of backwards, so it's not quite what you're looking for. But yeah, if you're going for more traditional VFX, let me see if I can find that real quick. I had something I could do. Yes, but mine's stuck in the toys industry since yesterday's stream. Nice. I'm about to sleep. Just quick question. Do all people have same proportions for anatomy? For example, same size, or is the belly button always the same point? That's a great question, actually. Super great question. While I'm looking something up real quick, I can answer that question. Basically, for proportions, everything kind of measures within itself. The human body in itself does measure well to itself. So, for example, the belly button always does line up at a certain location to the person's torso. Typically, if you were to drop your arms, your belly button and your elbow will line up pretty close to each other. Your ears to your pecs line up pretty well. Your forearm is typically the size of the foot. Your hand is typically the size of your face from finger to palm. So yes, there are rules for those proportions. However, there are times to break those rules. But if you understand that those rules exist, then you would be able to then turn around and kind of break them. So for example, what I mean break them, like take a look at the Hulk character, for example. The Hulk in itself is his head is much smaller than the rest of his body, but then you're also bending the rules of proportions due to his size and mass constraints. So typically you want to fall in line with those proportions in the beginning and then slightly start stepping out of them. But if you start with those proportions and volumes correctly, the rest of the time it's going to end up being pretty well in your favor. That is the wrong thing. There we go, glow effect. Here we go. What do we do here? So it was paint filter, not the glow filter. It was doing something. Take notes. I always take notes because you never know. So if we were to go back to filter here, and let's go to paint. So that's what it was. Paint. There we go. And then the color. And then I had some presets here that I was doing. Something like this. And then what was the other stuff? Where were we? This was black. Such. So yeah, it's not really a VFX program. As you can start to see, it's already a little bit more complicated than I originally intended to set out. But you could do something like that. It's not really glowing as much, but here, if you would like to screen grab these real quick. This is an example of kind of what I did. It wasn't the best, but yeah. So if you want to screen grab that and try it, give yourself, go ahead and do it. But it's not super easy to do the VFX stuff that way, you know. But prepping for VFX, getting the animation ready, and then putting into that type of program would help you out. So hopefully that, sorry, that was like a roundabout way, but I was able to find that tip, so. Is there such a doc for anatomy facts, like relationship between eyes to lips and ears? Actually, you know what? If you, I recommend two things. You either check out Anatomy for Sculptors, which is an amazing book, and they also have an Instagram and all the other stuff for anatomy stuff relation. But let me get you a link to an actual like anatomy website that you can reference anatomy all the time. I have it here. Where are we? Resources are all over the place today. I had it up the other day. Aha, there it is. So here's a website for you to kind of give you a little bit more insight to that. Thank you, Raytheon. Yeah, it absolutely is top tier. Yeah. Cool, cool. So, but yeah, you want to follow those rules. And that's the thing too, you know, if you practice creating base meshes, it's always a really good stuff. Ooh, that's a great one. Good, Raytheon. Okay. Come back in here real quick. A lot better for live streaming. Nice. Yep, I got all the references I can possibly. Dude, references is key, man. Like, I don't, there's not a day that goes by that I don't, at some point in time, find a reference or use a reference. Because you never know when you're going to need it. Okay, we're going to go ahead and invert that. We're going to pull that up a little bit. The stuff gets easier the more you do it. Like, I don't look at anatomy references as often as I used to, but I've referred to the same reference page like 100 times. So at some point it starts becoming muscle memory. But there's still like, dude, I have an écrochet like right here. This is actually from Raffaele Grassetti. I 3D printed it, and now I always have an écrochet that's right here. So there's always some sort of reference. I have an écrochet on the wall. And I got all sorts of stuff. So I'm always pulling resources. All right, man. Have a great night. Thanks for stopping in. You like that look? Captain America in the corner? Yeah, he's... Or this corner up here? I got him behind me, too. The zombie cat reminds me of the Black Flash. Nice. Yeah, yeah. Muscle memory, pun intended. Yes, absolutely. Okay. Okay. So now we got this kind of set up in place. We're going to go ahead and start switching on over. We're going to start merging this stuff soon enough. Now I have stuff like this where I have a hole. So the best thing to do is actually drop any and all subdivisions at this point, and we're going to go and close holes. And I'm just going to go ahead and grab that color just so I can have a similar color. There we go. Yes, Sculptastic. I sculpted the figure. Yes. You're talking about the zombie one. It was your main choice in Street Fighter since Alpha 2. Nice. Yeah, I've been rocking Ken since Street Fighter 2. But I've always switched. I mean, like, back in Street Fighter 2, Ken was just like a doppelganger of Ryu. And then eventually they started separating them, which I really liked. Okay. Now we have all that. Now we need to look at everything as a whole. So I'm going to go ahead and turn everything back on. And I'm going to go ahead and kind of break that apart. Now we need to basically start factoring where we want those keys to be. So Shift X is going to expose it. There we go. Okay, now we get to start choosing where and what and when things get cut. So let's actually work. I'm going to go to V5. I'm going to turn his torso and body on. Now what I want to do is actually start kind of masking things off where we can cut them. So I'm going to turn transparency on so I can see just how far everything goes in. And we're going to use the mass lasso. I'm actually going to go ahead and mask off that section. Rotate around. I'm going to mask off this section right here. I'm going to sharpen that mask. So if I solo that out, just Control Alt tap will sharpen it. Control will soften it. Now I'm going to go ahead and hit Control W. I'm going to isolate that. Control Shift drag, which will now hide that. And then we can go to Geometry, Modify Topology, Delete Hidden, and then close holes. And now we can actually use those as placeholders for where the key goes. Hey, are you still working in collectibles? Will you get a license for Street Fighter? Hey, Comics Legend. Actually, I now work for Pixelogic, or Maxon now. I work for Maxon, so I started a few weeks ago. So actually, I left Funko to come work here, and now I teach ZBrush full time, which is awesome. Have you ever felt overwhelmed finding references, like not exactly getting the idea in head? Yes, absolutely. I can't tell you how many times I have like come up with some sort of wall, or I just don't find quite what I'm looking for. So the idea isn't to try to find the exact reference. You want to kind of try to find more of, you want to kind of look more in the ballpark of something that's at least going to get you most of the way there. You're never going to find truly the exact reference you're looking for, you know, maybe once in a while, but like even then, like it's rare to find that exact reference. So it's easier to look for something that's going to get you most of the way there. I find that, like for posing, for example, I never quite find the right pose. So I find myself posing as best I can in front of a mirror, or set my phone up to take a picture of myself in a weird way, just to get the idea so that I have that kind of reference. It's challenging for sure, but yes, I would absolutely say it's overwhelming to find the right thing. Okay, now for his body here, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to hide everything else. So let's go to V6. Just hide this. Because now what I want to do, go to transparency, and I want to turn perspective off. I want to kind of cut this, or at least mask off a section. So we're going to try knife brush real quick. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. This would give me a nice flat surface. Cut that right there. Cool. That's what I'm looking for. Nice. Now we can have that key come in when we need it. So that's prepped there. Okay. That's prepped there. We might cut the hair into two sections. I might, depending on the size, cut the hair a little bit more. Fix his hair for a second. Random. doesn't really do me any favors. So let's just go ahead and delete that. We don't need that anymore. So I might cut across here after I weld this together and make this bit a separate piece. We'll figure that out. We'll see. All right, now let's make our key. And we're gonna get really, really simple with this key. We're not gonna do anything too crazy. So I need to do braided hair. Can you give me a clue about this? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a few ways to approach braided hair. The simplest way to approach braided hair is to just basically make one braid and then duplicate it, and then from there just kind of duplicate the whole process. So I could throw something together pretty quickly for you if you would like. So let's actually just go ahead and let's just grab a sphere. Doop, doop, doop. I'll take the quote sculptural approach to things. Will kind of be a down and dirty version, but hopefully this will help you get the idea. And again, references, right? This is what I'll do a lot of times, especially if I'm not sure on how I want to approach something. I'll actually type in braided hair. And I'll go to images. This is how I find most of my references. And right here, this is actually a really good reference to something like that. So I'll usually have something like that off on the side, and I'll try to mimic that as best I can. Now block notifications. I don't want notifications for that. Have something like this. Let's actually lower the resolution just a little bit. Boop, 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 boop. ZBrush. Let's go half. Let's actually switch it to a more suitable hair color, like yellow. Half. Now, the 2, let's go to brush. You'll have something kind of like this, right? And what you could do is duplicate that. Now, obviously, this is kind of funky, but this is just kind of to hopefully get you in the right step. But you'll do something like this. And you want it basically looking like it's going into each other. So again, just pull your reference, get your shape going. Here, let's do this real fast. Go. You want it kind of folding into itself. Now again, this is just really down and dirty, so don't judge too hard. But we'll merge that down. And then you could basically duplicate that. Now this is a really gross example. I actually have a hairbrush that I can send your way, but that's one way to go ahead and approach it. Just make the strands individual as best you can. And again, find your reference and work on that. Hey, what's up, Sniggles? In fact, I have one. That, if you want, I will throw out there at the end of the stream. That I built. It's actually a curve brush. I have subdivisions on, don't I? Yep, there it is. So that's one I have. So if you want something like that, I can send that to you, no problem. Hopefully that at least got you a little bit closer to what you're looking for. But if you would like that brush, I'll drop it here once the stream is over with. Down in the Discord. I'll drop it in there afterwards. Ew, banana. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and focus on getting this. So I'm going to 2 today. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off all of the color. I don't need the color for this whatsoever. In fact, instead of turning off all the color, I'm actually going to go to Z plugin. We're going to go to Subtool Master. I'm going to go to Fill. And then Color. Then go ahead. Let's just do that for everything. We don't need the color anymore. Cool. Now we're going to need to start reducing some of this stuff too. But let's get our key taper in there. I'm going to go Insert. All I use is a simple cube. Nothing too crazy. And then I go to Display Initialize, and then I cube it literally like this. Scale that up a little bit. Mask the bottom side. Inverse that, and then I taper that down. And then from here, we're just going to go to Polygroups, Group by Normals. And then we're going to crease polygroups. And then we're going to subdivide to like, yeah, 1,000. 1,000 should be fine. That's a dangerous question. How much money can an artist make in a month? ZBrush artists? It really just depends on who you're working for or what clients you have lined up. It's definitely it's definitely, if you're freelancing, it's kind of on the artist to hustle and get as much work as possible. The trick is finding a good appropriate price point for you, and it's always difficult to kind of talk about that because my price point for me is going to be different than you just based on location, maybe what we're trying to achieve, et cetera, et cetera. So freelancing is always kind of a little bit of a trial and error until you find a right price point, because you got to make sure that you have enough to survive on, right? But then if you're working for a studio, it really just depends on the job that's being offered and the price point in which the studio and, of course, you as the artist negotiate what you want and what it's after. So it's hard to say. You know, everybody's different. I've met artists that can make anywhere between, you know, $1,000 to $2,000 a month, and I've met artists that literally rake in hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's just a matter of finding where you want to be. If you have a little bit of everything experience, like you could do hard surface, you could do organic, you could do texturing, you could do rendering, you have a lot more to offer, then you have a lot more, you have a better position to ask for more money. So as a character artist or somebody who's worked in the toy industry, it was really in my best interest to be able to do all those things as best as I can. So when I went in for negotiation, I could say, look, I'm a sculptor, I'm a renderer, you know, I can prep stuff for animation. So I do all of this. I prep for manufacturing. Here's everything I can do, and then you negotiate at that point. So it really does depend, and also depends on the area too. I live in Los Angeles. People who live in, let's say, we'll say Georgia, for example, just as another location in the U.S., the price point between Georgia and Los Angeles are vastly different from each other. So what somebody makes in Georgia is going to be very different than what somebody makes in Los Angeles, just because of the cost of living in those areas. So those are things to keep in mind too, which always make it a bit of a challenge. And that's why it's hard to just like say, here's a number, go. It's very different. So my net worth is $1.7 trillion mentally. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for, yeah. It's awesome to be able to work here. Yes, I am. Comics, yes. Yeah, it also does depend on your negotiating skills too. Yep, I'll send it after this. I'll definitely send it after the stream for sure. I'll upload it directly. Not a problem. Okay. Now we have our key. So all we did was we took a cube, we cubed it to a very simple, you know, a very simple resolution, created a taper, And now we're just going to start placing this wherever we think it's necessary. So we're going to call this the OG key, because this is the key that I want to duplicate over and over again. I never want to just make one key and then, you know, manipulate that key and then find out that I need to make another key. It's always best to make one, then duplicate that one. And now we can use our transparency mode, and we're just going to generally place them wherever we feel is necessary. So there's one for the torso here. I'm not worried about its exact position. I'm more concerned about just kind of, I'll fine tune after. I'm more concerned about just like the general position, right? I'm going to go ahead and we're just going to Control-Shift-D. End up placing this around here, obviously for his alt dragging. Place that there. Perfect. Go ahead and Control Shift, grab that. Yeah, just kind of getting in the general area. I'm going to take that OG key. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate that. Just hitting Control-Shift-D at the moment. I'm not doing anything too crazy. I place that about where that should meet. That's funny. That's for now. So we have one here in the middle. I have a couple for the hands, one for the head, and now we need to place a couple for the feet. I'm going to go ahead and drag that down. I was working as an artist for the, but for games, still an intermediate in ZBrush, but struggle to create displacement maps. It takes RAM. Oh yes, yes, yes. Let me place this key real quick. Just do it. So real quick, once you're ready to create maps, come up here to multi-map exporter, select your displacement map. And when you export, that can help export all the different types of maps that you would like. Hey, what's up? What's up, Bean Lights? How you doing? Good to see you here. Place this here, drag that out. But yes, ZBrush is definitely CPU and RAM intensive. But luckily you don't need a super crazy graphics card, which is nice. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to place a couple keys here. I don't need subdivisions on these, so I'm going to go ahead and delete sub so I can control drag and create like a custom kind of key. This will help me kind of place that there. What is a Street Fighter? That's a great question. Street Fighter is somebody who's very good at fighting in the streets. Fight in the streets! Now I'm going to place this one just a little bit different, so there's always a slight variation. I'm actually going to bring that down, bring that up. All right, so now that's going to be our key placement. We want slight variation in between those different keys because we want to make sure, of course, that it's going to fit in one way, not multiple ways. If keys can fit in multiple ways, then it can be a little bit problematic. So that's why sometimes you'll see on collectibles, you'll see like a T key. It's not like a square, but it looks like a shape of a T, or it's a unique shape. That way, there's only one way of doing it. There's no getting it wrong. Sometimes that's super helpful, but you know, whenever you can. Or why his face had that kind of weird coloring on it. Okay, now that that's all prepped there, we're still working with 37 million polys. That's a lot. So we want to bring this down. So we're going to start now basically merging stuff together via Dynamesh and bringing down the resolution, but keeping the quality of the sculpt as much as possible. So let's just start with the obvious. We'll start with his head. Now I'm going to do a control stamp at the history right up here at the top. That's going to mark what the state of the geometry looks like in this moment. And I'm kind of curious. Let's go ahead and do auto groups. So I can select and hide certain things. Trying to make sure that there's not any weird holes or anything. It's something to remember. Especially when you're merging hair together. A great chance that you'll have a couple holes here and there. You want to make sure that you kind of check that out and adjust. Gonna push that in. That in. By Sculpt and ZBrush, what software should I use to make some lights and render in? Can't afford Maya. Would you recommend just sticking with Blender for both, or Sculpt and ZBrush and render? There's a lot of different render engines out there. You could render something fairly well in ZBrush. You don't always have to go to another application. And I'm not just saying that like legitimately. So for example, let's create a basic render right now. Something that you could use to just showcase your work a little bit. But if I wanted to render this out, and I have created a render. In fact, let me show you the render first so you can see where we're going with that. So here's a turn that I did. Just straight into ZBrush. Will this play for me? No, it won't play because it's an MPEG. Of course not. Okay. Okay. I got this render here in ZBrush. Now it's a turn, and I mixed a couple turns together, but just this on itself was created in ZBrush. And let's go over how you can do that real quick so you can create some pretty neat renders real fast. Let me load up my previous version. So now, let's say I want to render this in ZBrush. Let's start with some really cool stuff. First things first is I like to turn on the floor and make sure that my character is standing on the floor. And if you would like to use perspective, I recommend that you do it, especially for characters, because characters typically, they look better in perspective versus orthographic, just my opinion. So we're going to go to draw, and then I'm going to have it at 85 millimeter. So set that to 85. 50 is just a little too much. It looks a little too distorted, which is default. So when you turn on perspective for the first time, it'll default to 50. Just set it to 85. And then I'm going to go ahead and set the gizmo to the center of the base, just so that when I rotate, it rotates true center if I want to make that turn. Now we're just going to start working with lights. First thing is make sure that all of your subtools are set to a standard material, not a matte cap material. The difference being that standard materials react to light, matte cap materials have light baked in them. So any adjustments we make to the actual lights within ZBrush is not going to affect a matte cap in any way, shape, or form. So if you have or been using matte caps, you're going to want to use standard materials. I use Skin Shade 4, typically. That's my default. And then we're going to come up to light, and I'm just going to pin this on the side for a second. Let's close render and brush and dynamics. We're just going to focus on lights. Now, to use these lights, you touch it if you, for this blue one, if you touch it once, it turns it off. Touch it again, it turns it on. So you can turn on and off lights. If you select a brush, you just select it, it doesn't turn it on. You have to touch it again. So select, then turn it off, right? So I have my main light. Now you have this little dot here at the top. Let me see if I can blow that up. And by moving this around, it will adjust how that light is going to be affected. And what's cool is if you tap that circle once, it pushes that light from the front to the background. So that's how you create a rim light. So you go boop. So now, what I like to do is I first like to set my main light, this first one, as a key light. Something that's going to light him generically that looks appealing. I never go straight on because that's just too blasé. I usually like to think of it as the sun. Sun's coming from above. So we'll have something kind of more like that. Now this is up to you, but this is kind of my layout. So we'll do something like that. Now I turn this light off, okay? And I work with a rim light. So the light next to it, I typically like to use as a rim light. So I'm going to go ahead and push that in the back. And I'm going to crank up that intensity. I usually start at about 1 for a rim light because you want that intensity to be strong. So it separates the character from the background. We'll do something like 1.5 is pretty good. And you can tell how it's working based on how it's wrapping around that sphere, which will give you an idea. Now, these aren't hard set numbers. These numbers change depending on how I'm prepping. So you don't have to like write down, oh, 1.5. Just, you know, find something that's appealing to you. And then I turn on both the rim and I turn on the main. And then I do a test render. That's Shift R for test rendering. Now, there's a few things I do before I go any further with any of the lights because you notice the shadows are really harsh and nasty, and it's not appealing in any way, shape, or form. I decided not to do the swishes. Yeah, no swish today. Woo, woo, woo. Yep, all done in ZBrush. Yep. So now what I do is I go to render, and I'm going to pin that to the side too because I'm going to work with Bpr filters, okay? So we're going to go to Bpr. We're going to work with Bpr filters, we're going to work with Bpr Shadow, and we're going to work with Bpr properties, render properties. The first thing is I go to render properties, I turn on ambient occlusion, I usually turn on SSS for subsurface scattering, and sometimes I'll turn on high definition geometry, more towards the end when I'm ready to actually export, because that can lag computers. And then I'm going to go to Bpr Shadow. Now these are hard set numbers. This is what I do. For the G strength, I do 0.55. For the F strength, I do 0.85. Raise, I usually leave that at 12. And then angle, I do at about 35 to 40. Now, nothing happens when you change the Bpr filters or make any type of shadow adjustments. Anytime you make any type of property adjustment, you'll have to re-render. So I'm going to go Shift R one more time. And that is going to now take a little bit longer, but it's actually going to give me something a whole lot more appealing. So let this go ahead and go through. Now the shadows are softer, and the lighting is a little bit more complementary, and I'm getting a lot more happening. So I have a rim light, and I have a key light. Right. Now we can start working on the fill light. Absolutely. So what we'll do is from here, I'll close down the render. I'll shut these lights off because those are good. I like them. Now I need just a little bit of fill. I need something that's going to give me a little bit more flavor, right? So I like to choose usually this middle on the right-hand side, this middle light right there. And it's usually a color. Now from here, I have the main light up here in this corner, and I have the rim light back here. So fill light and key lights, they should, in my opinion, they should be opposite of each other, right? Basically doing a 3-point light. So you have your rim, then you have a key, then you have a fill. Fill's going to be softer typically. It's just going to fill in any parts that are unappealing. So we're actually going to drag that on this other side, okay? Definitely going to change that color from blue to something maybe a little bit warmer. Something like that. And I'll raise that up just a little bit. Now you could do a bounce. You can have it act like a bounce card where like the light's bouncing off the ground and coming up. Or you can just kind of keep it all coming from the same light direction. And now I turn on the other lights. Might look a little blown out, and if it is, we make an adjustment. But before you make an adjustment, go ahead and render it because the lights might seem really strong when it's not rendered, but as soon as you do your Bpr pass, it could make that adjustment. Here, there's a little bit of hot spots, so slightly warm. So I'm going to go back to my intensity. I'm going to drop it down. And this is on my fill light. I'm going to drop that down like 0.2. Go ahead and Shift R one more time. And it's going to go through. Thank you, thank you. Yeah, I love the Demon Slayer fan art. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's one of my favorite pieces. The blue looks like old arcade intro to Rio, right? Yeah, maybe you could sculpt more anime references. Yeah, I have a few more. I definitely have a few more anime characters in mind. I've been sculpting a lot more anime lately. So now we have something that looks, in my opinion, pretty good. But we're not quite there yet. Let's do a couple more things. It's kind of went from a 3D print to a render, but I really love rendering in there. Also, hey, Nexnox, how you doing, man? So now what we could do, okay, is adjust how the lighting and how the lighting interacts with the model, and how the environment responds to the lighting. So we're going to go back to the lights. And now here's something that I think a lot of people avoid in the beginning when messing with lights, is you have to turn certain features on. If you want subsurface scattering, you have to turn that on with the lights. Not all these lights don't typically have it on. In fact, if you select a light, like this main one, the first light only affects the shadows. So if I want subsurface scattering on this light, I have to turn that on. Second light, no shadows or subsurface scattering. And that's the rim light. I don't really care for the rim light to have any subsurface scattering at the moment, but if I wanted to, I could definitely turn that on. And same with the fill light. Not every light has to be displaying shadows or subsurface scattering, just the ones that you want to. So you could pick and choose. I'm going to go ahead and choose that the key light and the fill light will be the lights that actually have SSS. Now, once I turn on SSS, that's going to increase my render time. So just be patient with that. So notice nothing has happened. I'm going to go ahead and Shift R one more time. If you don't move your scene, it will render faster. So don't move your scene around when you're prepping all your lights and stuff. It will render faster because it already understands the position in the viewport. Now we have SSS on there. Go back to render. And now I do very minimal Bpr filter adjustments. First one I do is I turn on this very first one that's usually set to noise. And I actually go to radial overlay. I go ahead and set that up real quick. And let's just do another one. Go. I never use blur. The radial overlay. Now, the radial overlay affects with the floor. I'm going to turn the floor off for a second. And notice how the scene is much different. As soon as I turn the floor on, radial overlay is affecting, it's basically like a fake light source from the very top coming down. And it bounces off the floor. It has floor engagement. So turning that on gives me this result. Turning it off gives me this result. So slightly different. So for the effect you want to go for, I would say I personally turn the floor on. And now I go to modifiers and I start adjusting the up and down. Maybe the radius a bit, a little bit bigger, maybe the fall off, just so I can see a little bit more of the character. And I adjust this however I feel I need to. What's the focus of my character? All right? And I don't have to re-render that because filters can be edited in real time. I want to make sure that I am not missing anything. Naming lights. Yeah. Your favorite product you worked on at Funko that you could talk about that we could buy now? Oh, man. I don't know if they've released anything yet. I'd have to get back to you on that one. I would say, actually, the project I helped work on a lot that I know has been released is actually the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle digital pop line. That's something that, that was a lot of fun. Super fun. Cool. So now I have this. And now, I have a lot that's still under NDA. A lot. Now that we have this, now we can go ahead. This third option is to sharpen it. That'll just give me a little. I just turn it on. I never actually really adjust that. It's usually good on its own. And then Orton, if the scene itself is too dark still, you know, don't adjust the lights, just go to Orton, turn that on. Orton is a really great way to add a little extra fill to your scene without adjusting too much. And what's really cool is if anybody's familiar with Photoshop, all of these filters, right? I'm going to go here to this this colorized filter, for example. Actually, no, let's go to this blue filter. All of these filters have blend modes. So right underneath the filter itself is a blend mode. So you can adjust that blend mode to whatever you want. So if you want something a little bit crazier, a little bit more dynamic, go through and say, oh, I want to add a overlay. Boom. Now give me a little bit of tone. Then you turn that off and on and kind of see how that affects your scene. So completely up to you on that works. Now we have something that I think is usable to either push to social media, to, you know, Instagram, Twitter. I mean, even at this point, it's like, let's adjust maybe a few things. Maybe that rim is not strong enough, right? So let's come back. Now we can come here, adjust that rim just a little bit more. Come in, and that's it. That's all it really takes to get a really good render coming out of ZBrush. You don't have to go too crazy, and you can get a lot with a little. And this is like the tip of the iceberg, because the reality too is that under all of these different, you have Bpr, SSS scattering, you can adjust how the SSS is affecting. You can adjust how the ambient occlusion affects. You can adjust anti-aliasing. You can add fog, fast render. You can have preview AO, preview wax. So you have a lot of control. If you have live booleans, you can render those booleans out. You have, you know, you could push to keyshot. So all of these different things right here in itself too, how deep the shadows are. It's usually set to a dark, like a deep black, but let's say I actually want more of a richer, darker purple. Just come in here and add in that purple light, re-render that scene, and now my shadows will be a little bit more purpley instead of just black, because black is just a deep dark color where everything gets lost. So it's helpful to have a little bit of richness to your render. And then you have options. You know, once you come in here to render properties and turn on SSS, for example, then if you wanted to push this to another application like Photoshop, you could totally do that. All you have to do is just come on in to Bpr render passes, and you can touch each one of these and export these out, and then you can combine them in another program. But let's say I want to make a movie of this. Now I'm super happy, and I want this movie to showcase. So we can now go to movie. And what's really cool is if you go to render at the very top here real fast, you have a save function. So you can actually save out all of these render presets and use them every time. So save that preset out. Boom. And then you'll have to do that for your lights. Save my lights out. So if you find that you use this setup all the time, you can just load them each time. Load in your render presets, load in your light presets, and then now you don't have to do this every time. And then for the movie, we're going to go ahead. You can either hit turntable, and if I hit turntable now, my computer and the stream will scream, so we're not going to do that. But what we can do is let's actually get a little fancy. So let's go to our timeline and actually create a movie that is a little bit more interesting. So we're going to go to timeline, and I'm going to go to show timeline. Now notice when I do that, right above my my history timeline is my movie timeline. Isn't Ken's gloves brown or black? Actually, in the alpha movie, they were yellow, and actually he wasn't wearing full gloves. I kind of took a little bit of creative liberty. Also, it was one of his costume changes at some point. Nice, awesome. So now we have our timeline, and what's cool is I'm going to start moving. So this is going to turn off that render preview. I'm going to go ahead and hit F, and now if I want to add in any type of, you know, just timeline track, if we go to timeline tracks, you can see it's defaulted to edit on the camera. Now, if I do any of this, your viewport, think of the viewport as your camera. So now what we get to do is, like, I'm going to touch right there, and then I'm going to go ahead and kind of rotate this around on the side. I'm going to touch right there. Now, if I use the arrow keys, I can snap between the two. But if I grab this little bar, start dragging, it's going to start going through the timeline, right? So now I'm going to zoom in Rotate a little bit more. Zoom in. Hit another timeline. Zoom in and rotate a little bit more. Hit another timeline. Move this around. Hit another one. All right. Come in here. Hit another one. Now start to zoom out. Bring this up. Again, I'll hit F to kind of reframe it. Lock that in like this. Right? And now we're right back pretty much where we started. So if I come through here, here's my movie timeline. Now if I hold Control, Shift, and touch that, it's actually going to play my movie as a preview. So it's kind of just coming through. Actually, sorry, I lied. That was actually recording. My bad. Delete that real fast. Whee! So if I just hit Control and tap it, it's gonna play it. Come on. Of course, now it's freaking out. Just grab it and drag it. But Control tap, there we go. It should go through the whole series. Now, if you hit Control Shift, that's what it was. That's going to actually record and render it out. We don't want that right now. Because what we can do now is, now that we have our timeline coming through. Now, if we hit render, this will be the scary part. Now, once it hits render, if I go ahead and hold Control Shift and tap, it's now going to render the scene like this and record that movie. Can you change the speed? No, yeah, kind of. You have start playback and duration of time. So you could set your duration and your playback time. So yeah, in a sense, you can adjust that. I know, stuff always fails when you try to do somebody else. I know, right? That's always how it goes. I appreciate you understanding, but yeah. So now if I wanted to record this, so I'm gonna go ahead and just risk it for a biscuit. We're gonna hold Control Shift. I'm gonna tap this, and now it's going to start rendering. Hopefully my stream isn't freaking out. Looks pretty sturdy, so that's good. It's gonna render each frame, and then it's gonna go through and start recording. So you could see that pushing through. I'm gonna go ahead and stop that for now, because that's just gonna take mighty long. And the render times, of course, will go on as pretty much will happen at whatever your computer can handle. So this is one of those things where if I'm gonna do a fancy timeline movie like this, I typically will turn around and I will hit render and then I will walk away, because why not? So, and then there's a lot of other really cool stuff you can do. You could show your wireframe, you can show your expose, you can link subtools. There's a lot here that you can do that would take a lot of time to explain it. So just kind of go in there and play around. But that's how you could go ahead and get something not only rendered in ZBrush looking really good, but also too you can create a custom movie. Doesn't have to be a turntable. Although I'll admit, a lot of times you'll see me when I post on my socials, it will just be a timeline, a simple turn, because it's already preset, and then in that way I don't have to worry about it so much. And then again, once you create a custom timeline, right, you could save that timeline. ZBrush movie, ZMO file. Hey, McBobbles. Yep. And then when you're all done with that, you know, let's say like next time you load up ZBrush and you're like, I need to save that movie and bring in all my presets. Now you just load in all that stuff. Just go to timeline, load it in. Here it is. So for example, just to show you, if you wanted to get rid of some of these points, by the way, in the timeline, just hold Control and start dragging this stuff out. Let's say you've saved this out and you're like, okay, so loaded up ZBrush. Here it is. I can go ahead and load that movie in timeline. Get my movie timeline back. And there it is. It's all right there. What's really cool about this, I will also use this timeline sometimes just to store points. Like when I was doing the Sculpt off, for example, last year, and I wanted a certain scene, I actually used the timeline to create a specific spot. So I was like, let's say I want him like this, right? Like maybe this is my final render. Well, I just come in here, create that timeline, and then the arrow key will let me adjust and go through all of those different points. So I can always snap back to that position every single time, which is very, very helpful, especially if you're trying to do stuff. A quick question: is there a function to add a min and max size to brush so that the start and end of the stroke is thinner than the rest? So a min and max size, there's not a specific function that does that because the brush size itself is actually catered to the viewport. But what you can do if you wanted a min max kind of size is a lot of times we recommend people work in ZBrush with a tablet because we have pressure sensitivity, which if you went under preferences and tablet, you have pressure sensitivity where you can adjust how much that is, etc., etc. You can also too adjust with lazy mouse. You can have all this function. You have curve functions. You go under brush. You also have curve, so you can edit this curve itself. So it's not just like small point, big point. You can actually, you have like a graph that you can adjust for that curve and how that brush responds. So, so kind of yes, kind of no. And then of course you can always reset your curves if you broke them. Now, if you could just quickly go over the exporting to Cinema 4D, rigging, and animating punch move. Well, I can tell you right now that if you have Cinema 4D and you're trying to get your models from ZBrush into Cinema 4D, GoZ links to Cinema 4D. So install GoZ on ZBrush side to Cinema 4D, install GoZ on Cinema 4D side, and then just go ahead and click your GoZ. If it asks you the first time where that's going, just send that on over to say, oh, you're going to Cinema 4D, and then it'll plop it right over. Very, very simple, very, very easy. Nice, thanks a lot. Not a problem. All right. So we only have a few minutes left. We got about, what do we got? We got 15, 14 minutes left. So I'm going to go ahead and just continue. We're going to continue prepping here. Now here's the other cool thing with lights is sometimes they overwhelm everything. We're going to go ahead and turn off a good chunk of that. There we go. Nice, nice. I wanted to know how to Dynamesh without disrupting fingers and any similar close islands. Yeah, okay, so great. That's perfect actually because I'm going to be Dynameshing right now. So Dynamesh is viewport dependent on its resolution and its size. So what I recommend before you start utilizing Dynamesh, if your model itself might be too small or too big for the scene, and you can actually see that under preview, you can kind of see how your model is fitting in. Your selected subtool fits in with this little square right here. You can actually optimize this. So an easy way to optimize that to make sure that your brush size is correct, you can actually take your whole model, go to Transpose Master, T-Pose Mesh, and then we can go ahead and unify the whole scene. Now, just remember that when you are using Dynamesh to weld things together, it's going to spread the geometry as equally across all of the model as best as it can. That's going to cause conflict if you have really small fingers and a big bulky hand, and let's say they're separated. So a lot of times one way to get around that is to separate the hand and have the hand as a separate subtool. So that way you don't have to worry so much about Dynameshing the body and having the hand collapse. It's the same thing with ZRemesher. If you have the hands welded to the whole body and you're ZRemeshing the whole hand, the whole body, the hands are going to get affected as well because it's only going to spread as much as possible. Of course, I just brought over the entire Dynamesh version. That was not smart. But here, what we could do, let's do it the other way. Let's probably do it the easier way, which is let's go to Scale Master and then ZBrush Scale Unify, that was the easiest way. I don't know why I didn't do that first. But that will help unify everything to the size and the scene as best as you can. Right? Nice self-portrait. Thanks. Yeah, I try. I try. So it's actually unifying to the best of its ability. which is really going to help me out when I decide to Dynamesh things. Go. So now when I go to Dynamesh, so here we'll use the gloves as an example, and just to reiterate the sample, I'm actually going to break this apart. So I'm going to go to here, and I'm going to split hidden. Okay. So we have this hands, and we have little welding spots in between, right? We have little bits together, and we also have, you know, we have stitching that we want to keep, right? So if you're on the new version of ZBrush, and let's save a new version. Am I doing? I'm doing well. How are you doing? Doing really, really well. We're about ready to wrap up. We got about 10 more minutes left. I'm gonna adjust this light a little bit. It's kind of blinding me. That was a little brighter than I thought. Okay. So if you're in the new version of ZBrush, easiest way to Dynamesh things now is actually to go to Geometry. And then we're going to pick Dynamesh. Eyes need to focus. That light was so bright. Dynamesh. And now you have a picker right here. Picker. You click and drag that, you can actually come in and find the resolution of the highest part of your model. Looks like this resolution is actually pretty high. That's pretty high. Cool. So now I'm going to go ahead and hit Control Tap there on the timeline. And now what I'm going to do is Dynamesh this at the resolution that I picked, because that's the resolution that's within, and it'll hold that resolution for the whole model. So I'm going to go ahead, and now I picked a timeline spot right up here, because if the resolution drops a bit, I can project that history back. I'm going to hit Dynamesh. Actually, I should have turned blur off, but we'll see what happens. Yeah, let's turn blur off. Go one more time. Yes, I'm going to be streaming every Wednesday now this time. It'll be for 2 hours from noon to 2. Whoops. Okay, so notice this just happened. That's because when I Control Z, my resolution went back to 128. So I need to kick that all the way back up there, or take that picker, come in and pick that resolution, turn that blur down, and hit Dynamesh. There we go. Now that I have this, what I can do is, this resolution is pretty good. If we look in the fingers though, notice right here, yeah, I think this is what you were talking about, how those fingers, they just kind of like collapse a little bit on their own. I can either rework that, or I could try to project history, which is what I'll try to do. So I'm going to go to Subtool, Project, and Project History. I don't need to worry about color. And that will take the history of the previous iteration of the part that we stamped, and it will bring all that detail on over as best as it can. It's not always 100%, but it's a little bit better. Because sometimes Dynamesh is only going to hold as much resolution as it's capable of holding. So sometimes you will need to rework that. But, I mean, we went from 4.8 million to 566,000, and we are pretty much holding damn near the same resolution, pretty much the same resolution that we had before. So that's actually not too bad. So we're also reducing the size of it all. We're like bringing down the mesh density, which is nice. So we're going to do that again. New geometry. I'm just going to copy what I had on the other hand, because it's the same thing. Yes, this is for 3D printing. Yeah, the project history will choke it just a little bit for sure. I'm actually not surprised that it did that. Oh, that's a great question. Why would I Dynamesh a lower poly count instead of decimate? So the reason why I'm actually choosing the Dynamesh first, I'll come back here real quick, is that all of these are separate subtools. They're not welded together yet. And when we 3D print something, we want it to be watertight. If I decimate it, it could do a really good job at getting it welded together, but when it decimates, we're working with triangles, and I can control the mesh a little bit through picking the resolution that I want, but it's not like ideal mesh quality. So by dynameshing first, I can work in a much denser resolution, or a better resolution that is easier to manipulate, and then I'll decimate afterwards. But Dynamesh ensures a watertight model every time. So it's a workflow that I've come to love a lot. And I'm still also going to be doing live Boolean, so I don't want to decimate right now and then live Boolean, because decimating something that gets it low is going to actually, when I go to live Boolean, it may or may not present problems. Again, because it's more tessellated, triangulated shapes. It's not great mesh to work with. I decimate at the very end. It dropping that low and keeping this kind of resolution is actually more of a perk than the actual function. I typically try to keep the resolution near the same when I'm going from subdivided merged mesh to Dynamesh to get watertight, because then I can almost guarantee that it's about the same quality each time. The fact that I was able to hold that kind of resolution really well, again, is just a bonus. Now this is actually 791,000 points. I'm actually going to subdivide up just a little bit on this one. Delete lower before I Dynamesh it. Okay, I'm going to hold that spot. I'm going to Dynamesh. Yep, not a problem. Thank you. That's really helpful. Not a problem. Not a problem. All right, we only got a couple more minutes, so I wasn't able to finish this. So let's finish this up next week on Wednesday, because we'll go over the rest of the process. So we'll kind of end this for now, and then we'll go ahead and work on that. But hopefully this was helpful for you guys. But you can see here that Dynamesh actually worked out really, really well. Kept a high resolution. That's perfect. So what I might do is just go ahead and Dynamesh everything off stream, because it's the same process. I'm doing that to everything, and then we'll just get into key cutting, because everything you saw me do to the gloves and to the body, I'm going to do to the rest of it. And if I run into any problems, I can tell you what those problems were. But generally speaking, I shouldn't run into too many problems. As long as everything, when you're Dynameshing, the thing to remember is you want all of the meshes that you're trying to merge together to intersect into each other. So that way, because what Dynamesh will do is it will look at the mesh as a whole, it will merge it all together and delete the inside, making it watertight. But if there are holes or pockets, then we can go through and cover how to fix those, just in case you miss something. And I'm expecting there to be at least a pocket in the hair, because the hair, I just kind of threw that together. It's not, it looks good on the outside, but on the inside, it's kind of meh, whatever. So, all right, that's going to be it for today. Thank you guys very much for hanging out with me. It was a pleasure. Christopher, Dorman, everybody, Ahmed, thank you guys for stopping in. Rethion, a pleasure to see you here. Always, Ram, same. Guys, take it easy. Moshi Moshi, thank you for stopping by. So many people, thank you guys. I will catch you next Wednesday, 12 to 2. And I will see you guys later. Bye, McBubbles. Bye. Being light. Bye. See you guys.